Hello and welcome to Code Harvest. This is a step-by-step tutorial video on how to create a product page for an e-commerce website using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, where we also include UI designs such as sliders, animations, and so on. This e-commerce specifically sells electronics, and the company name we created is called Alive. Now, due to how long the full tutorial is, we have separated it into different videos and parts. So this is part 3 of the product page tutorial. So you can check out the full playlist in the description and the top comment down below. Now, we also created a tutorial for the homepage of the website, so the link to that video is in the description down below as well. So now subscribe to Code Harvest and let's get started. Let's create a new comment, and in this comment we'll just say product categories, as that is what we're going to create now. Alright, so we're going to create a new div first of all, and we're going to have an ID for this, and we're going to call it product category container, so something digestible, sensible. And inside our container we can create another div, and so this container will have 2 sections. The first section will be basically the text area. There's also going to be a heading, a simple heading on top. So now let's create an ID, and we'll call it product category text. And inside our text, first we want to include a little blue line, so this is going to be a little bit of a design, and we'll create a different modern look for our website. So let's create another div, and we'll have it as a class rather than an ID, because we're also going to use it in other sections. So this is going to be the second section, but it's going to be the first section with the blue lines. So in each section there's going to be a little blue line, which will act sort of like a border, but a vertical border rather than horizontal. And then inside, well, actually we won't keep anything inside, and since it's just going to be a blue line, we'll change this into a span instead. But then for our next one, we'll also include a span element, and its class name will be section category text, because we're also going to be using this in other sections of the document. For example, in the slideshow area, for each section of the slideshow, we're going to have this little blue line, and we're going to have the category name. So for this one, this category name is just called category, so users are able to see what category are available. So we're just going to call this categories. Now we'll create another div, which is going to be another child element of the container. Also, this I realized is spaced. So for our second container, our second child element, we're going to call it product category wrapper. Alright, so inside we're going to create another div, and we're going to create a category. So this is going to be one that's repeated, and it's going to have, all the categories are going to have the same design. So it's just going to be a rectangular box, a rectangularly horizontal box. So we're going to create a class called product category, so something simple for each white box. And this is where we'll be designing how the category box looks like. And then there's going to be 2 sections. So the first part is going to be the image. So we're going to create a class once again, and we're going to name this class product category image section. And then we're going to include an image element and a source attribute. So this is where our file path, the file path of the image, which should be in images. So when you check, mine is in collection. So we have all of our images ready of the collections. So we have from all until watch. So we're just going to collect everything from the collection folder. Obviously you can name the folder however you want, something easy, sensible, and easy to understand. So we're going to get it from collection, and we're going to start with all.png. And of course we always need to have an alternative text, so add the alternative text attribute. And you can describe it as, since this is the all category, you can just describe it as image collection containing all categories. So you don't need to keep it, we don't need to make it really long, just something sweet and short. And then for the second section of the product category of the white box, we can create another class, and we will call this class product category description section, and so this is where we will add in the details. So for example, the name of the category and how many items there are in total in that category. So we're going to go with two span elements. So the first one will be the name of the category. So we'll create a class for this, and we're just going to call it product category type. And for this one, it's going to be called all. And then we'll create another span element, and for this class, we're going to name it product category number. And for this, we'll go with 60 items because for each category there are 12 products, so all in total are going to be 60. So we have 60 items. So now let's check our white box, and obviously it's not designed. And as you can see, I actually edited this image, so all of these categories are the ones that are going to be displayed in each box in the image section. But for this one, I used the Pixlr website, and there you're able to basically edit your image. And basically what I did is I added multiple layers of these images and I combined them together. So now we're going to copy this this whole category code, and we're going to repeat it 5 times for each section. And what we're going to do now is going to change the name, so the name of the category, and we're also obviously going to change the alternative text. So instead of all categories, this is going to say, for example, if it's headphones, then headphone category. And we're also going to change the item number to 12 items, for each 5 items, for each 5 categories there are 12 items. Alright, so now we're done with designing our section. Not designing, but setting up our section with HTML. So we're going to scroll up to the top of the section so that we can edit so that we can style each element one by one, starting with the top. And we're going to go with designing our ID, which is product category container. But before that, let's create a comment, as this is a new section, and we're going to call this product category section. Alright, so now we're going to select it with a hashtag as it is an ID, and all we want to do is create a certain amount of spacing between the box or the top section and the product category section here. So we want it to be at margin top, so only the spacing on top of the container. So this is the whole container from here till down, and we want to create a spacing. There is a spacing already that we added in the top section. We added margin bottom. But now we're going to add our own spacing with the container as we want more space, and we're going to set it to 45 pixels. Now we want to select the text, as that is next, and that is also an ID. So we're going to use a hashtag in order to select the ID, and what we want to do is include a margin spacing to the bottom of the text. So basically the bottom of categories, and you can see that it changed as the images have gone lower because of the spacing. You can also go with padding if you'd like. For now, we are going to include a flex layout. So basically, we're going to be adding this blue line very soon, and we don't want it to be on top of the blue line area, but we want it to be in the middle. So we're going to use the flex layout in order to change or set the text to be vertically centered. So we're going to use the flexible layout, and we're going to use place items in order to set it to the center vertically. So obviously nothing has changed just yet, but now you'll see as we add the blue line. So that is a class that we added, so it's the span element here, and we want it to be like a sort of object, a sort of border, but a very thick border. So we'll define the height, and we want it to be long, but we want the width to be a little shorter, a little smaller. And then we also want there to be some spacing between the blue line and the category's title text. And then we'll add a background color so that we can see the color or the blue line, and because of its name blue line, it needs to be blue. So we'll go with a color that we've used for the button, 3B71DC, And before we check out our web page, we also with the semicolon, we also want it to have a border radius. As right now it looks too squarey, so we'll add a border radius so that it can look round and more modern and soft. And we'll go with 20 pixels as it looked too rough. And that looks way better. So now you can see that it is placed vertically centered. If we left it as it was, it would have to stay on top. I mean, it would be placed on top. So that's why we used flex layout in order to position the title to be vertically centered. Alright, so now we are going to be working on the text, and we also classified it as a class, since we're also going to be using it in the other sections, especially for the slideshow. And since it is a class, we're going to use a dot in order to select the class. And what we want to do is we want the background, the text color to be dark gray, so we use the one that we've used throughout for the other texts. We also want to set up a font weight of 500, and we're not going to make it any bigger. And we're also going to make it large, sort of large. And now we're going to be working on our wrapper. Alright, so now we're going to be working on the wrapper, so let's copy the name and paste it, and we're going to use a hashtag since it is an ID, and what we want to have is a flexible layout because it carries all of the categories from all headphones, smartwatch, laptop, etc. So what we want to do is include a flexible layout just so we could use justify content, and we want to set that to have to be spaced between, not around but between, so we want space between each item. Another thing is we need to set the width, as if we do not set the width, then the wrapper would not know how to space all of the items, since they would all be together and it can't really create its own spacing. So we need to set the width to 100% so that it knows and calculates how much spacing is needed for each item. And then we also need to use a flex wrapper. So we did not use this before, but what we want to do is we want to use the CSS property, which will cause the items to wrap or to move to the next line if it goes over the width limit. So the width limit is 100%. So right now, as you can see, now there is no longer, the items were scrollable and you could scroll sideways, but now you can see that the items have moved to new lines since they have gone over or crossed over the width, which is set to 100%. Alright, so now we're going to work on the product category itself, each product category. So we're going to select the class, and since it is a class, we're going to use a dot. And first we want to set the width of the box, since it's going to be a wide rectangular horizontal box. So we're going to set that to 375 pixels. We're going to set the height to 800 pixels, and we want anything that overflows the box to be hidden. So the image should also be hidden. Now it looks too weird, so we're going to change the image size very soon. So now we're going to include a flexible layout, as we want the items, since the categories are separated into two sections, which is the first one being the image, which will be on the left side, and the description on the right side. So we want to create a flexible layout in order to make that possible. And another thing is we want to justify everything to the start. So to the start means basically means we want to put everything to the left side horizontally. Now we also want to make sure that every item is placed horizontally center. So we're going to use place items, and we're going to set it to the center. We also want to include a border radius, since we want the white box to look circular. We want it to have round corners and not sharp pointy corners. They don't look user-friendly, so we're going to change and include the border radius so that it looks more modern. Now another thing is we want to include a margin, or we want to include spacing vertically. So since they're going to be separated into into two rows, we want spacing between the boxes up in the first row and the second row. So we want each item to have a margin bottom of 15 pixels. So a bottom spacing of 15 pixels. So now you can see that there is now spacing And I think you can also see the border radius now. It's more clearer since they were all congested together. We also want to include a box shadow to make a 3D or create a 3D effect. So we're going to set the X value to 0, the Y value to 0 as well. So unlike the other one, we set the Y value, but for this one, we're going to keep it at 0. So you just wanted to outline the shape. And we're going to include a shadow of 30 pixels. So we want it to be 30 pixels wide, and we also want it to be blurry. And we're also going to use the RGBA values. So the first value will be 129. We just don't want it to be completely black, but we want it to be grayish, light grayish, something subtle, but you can tell it's 3D, but it's kind of subtle. And we are going to set the alpha value or the opacity value to 0.1, and now that should be fine. So now if you look closely, you can see a little bit of a box shadow. So now we're going to one more thing, we also need to add a transition property, since we're also going to create a hovering effect. So when we hover around these boxes, we want each box, the box that you're hovering on or the user hovers on, it should basically enlarge. So we want to create a transition, and we want to slow down the process so that you can create a smooth transition or smooth change from its current size to a larger size. So we're going to slow down the process by 0.3 seconds, which we usually use, and we want it in both ways: when the user enters or hovers around the object, and when the mouse leaves the object. Okay, I need to put a semicolon here, and now we're fine. And now let's add the hovering effect. So we're going to select the class cursor, and we want the cursor to be, and we're going to add the hover keyword. So over here, what we want to do is create a transformation. And what type of transformation? We want to include a scale of, and we want it to enlarge by 1.1. So when we hover around it, we can see that it gets larger. But another thing is, you can see that our mouse stays the same, but we want our mouse to basically have this white. Alright, so now we're going to be working on the image section of our category. So now we're done working on the product category box itself. So because it is a class, we're going to use a dot in order to select the class name or the class element. And we're going to set the background color to something that you find is a good color combination. So I found a good blue, white, very light blue color combination to be 231, 238, and 252. And another thing is, we want to add a little bit of padding. But before that, let's actually include a flexible layout. And we want to include a flexible layout just so we can position the image to be horizontally centered and vertically centered. So usually it is always by default on top of a box, but we want it to be centered vertically and also horizontally. So we're going to use the flexible layout to help us. We're going to use justify content, and we're going to center it horizontally center and vertically center as well. Now the last thing we want to do is set up padding space. So we're going to set the padding space to be 10 pixels. Now here's the problem. We also want to set the width. So we want the width to be around here. So we want it to be around 120 pixels. However, if we set the width to 100 pixels, we also have spacing from padding. So we have extra space from padding, and it causes the width value to actually be higher than it is. So the width value is 140 pixels, but because padding affects the left and the right side of an element, it will cause 20 added pixels. So the width size of the image would be 160 pixels. Because we're using padding so that the image, there needs to be some spacing between the image and the box itself, which is why we need to add padding. But because of padding, we have space on the left and on the right side of the box, so that will cause 10 plus 10, which is 20. 20 plus 140 is 160. So in order to fix it and to adjust the width to be what it should be, which is 140 pixels, we're not going to reduce the padding size or remove it completely, but we're going to use this function called calcs, which basically stands for calculation, and it calculates for us, but we have to do the math. So the total spacing from padding is 20 pixels left and right, which affects the width. So it's 20 pixels in total because 10 plus 10 is 20. But we do need to put space in between. Oh, the spacing is very important. Just one space bar click should be enough. Alright, so now what it does is it subtracts it by the amount of padding there is left and right in total, which is 20 pixels. So the padding stays the same. So 140 minus 20 would be 120 pixels. So now technically the width value from here is 120 pixels, but again we did not remove the padding property, so the padding space, the extra space from padding still remains, and the extra space is still 20 pixels. So now the official width value is 140 pixels rather than the extra 160 pixels it was, because we want the width value to be 140 pixels in total. So now we're going to do the same thing for the height. So now we're going to work on the height, and we're going to use a calculation function or method as well. And this time we want the height to take 100% of the box. Also, I feel like the width is too wide. I think we want it to be somewhere here. So we want it to be 120 pixels in total rather. Yeah, that looks much better. And now what we want to do is change the height value, and we want it to be 100%. However, if it is 100%, which is the total, which is 100 pixels technically, because the whole box is 100 pixels, but then there's also padding on the top and on the bottom of the section, and because of the spacing from the top and bottom, which gives 10 plus 10, which gives 20 pixels in total, that means there'll be 20 pixels of height, extra height in the height value in total, if that makes sense. So we're going to subtract it once again by 20 pixels. So now 100 pixels subtracted by 20 is 80 pixels, but because of the padding space that we did not remove, which still stays, and 10 plus 10 from top and bottom is 20 pixels, so 80 plus 20 would give 100 pixels, which is what we want the image section to be. So I hope all that makes sense. Now the next thing we want to do is edit the image element. So I'm just going to copy the container name, select the image element, and what we want to do is set a max width, and I found out that 97% was a good value. And same thing for the height, we want it to be 97%, because if we set it to 100%, some of the images were too large, and we wanted the width and the height to reduce to around 95%. Some of the images were perfect at 100% max width and height. So we wanted to get a middle value, or the middle ground, or a middle value between 95 and 100 pixels, and we found out that 97 pixels looked good and fit all images. And one more thing that is very important, so now you can see all of the images fit. One more thing that is very important is we want to make sure that the images are always fit inside the element. So we can set the image property to object fit. We can set it to contain, so that means the image will always be contained within the section. Okay, so now let's copy the name, and here we're going to, since it is class, we're going to use a dot in order to select it, and we're going to add 3 important properties. The first one is we want, so this is basically the title that we're going to add very soon. Alright, so what we want is to include a flexible layout. Now the thing is, we want the name of the category and the number of items to be in one column rather than one row. So, but we're using the flexible layouts, but we can change the flex direction. So we can set it to a column this time, which we haven't used before. So now that it is in one column, another thing is we want to use the justified content property, and we want to make sure that the items are vertically centered. So you see, when the flex direction, usually we use justified content in order to center an element horizontally centered, so left and right it should be centered horizontally, but that is only when the flex direction is in a row or in one line together. But because we're using a column instead, when we use the justified content property, it basically centers the image vertically for us. So another thing is we want this description section to have spacing between the section itself and the image next to it. So we want to set the padding, the spacing to 30 pixels. I think 30 pixels sounds good. And we also want to increase and to make sure that the height is set to 100 pixels. So now the items should be vertically centered. And another thing is we want to use the flex to grow property. So let's just see how it looks like right now. Let me show you the outline or how the description is set. So it only takes up the amount of space that the text has taken, but we want it to take over the rest of the space remaining. And in order to do that, we can use the flex grow layout. So we can use the flex grow layout, and when we set it to when we set it to 1, we can see that it takes over the rest of the space remaining, which is what we wanted. Alright, so now we're going to be working on the product type. So the first one is obviously all, but we want to edit the text because the text looks too bold. Sorry, not too bold, but too thin, and it does not look smooth or modern. So in order to select the class, we're going to use this section or the parent element. And with that, we're going to select the class that we want to work on, which is product category type. And it is also a class, so we'll use a dot. Now, what we want to have is a dark gray font. We want the font weight to be about 500 in boldness, and we want a font size of about 18 pixels. So we want it to be slightly larger. So now we can see that the website is starting to work well. Another thing is we want to change the category number of items. So we've called it product category number. So we're going to use the parent element once again, and then we're going to select the elements that we want to style. And what we want it to have is we want it to have a lighter font color than the color that we used on top. So that was a slightly dark gray. Now we want this one to be slightly light gray, and we're going to use the font color that we used for the banner. So this color right here to create a nice soft look. So 137 helps us with that. So make sure that you also use the color checker in order to see which color combination fits well. And then we're going to change the font size to be something smaller than what it is currently. So by default, as I said earlier, text font sizes are always 16 pixels. So now we reduced it to 15 pixels. So now I think that looks good. So now we're going to create another div, but before that, we're going to first indicate that this is the end of the second section. So we'll say end of product category. Alright, and now we're at the end of part 3. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button, comment down below, and subscribe to Code Harvest. Thank you so much for watching. Now see you in part 4 of the eLive web series.